Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on our ParkHouseConnects when we're talking about safeguarding children and child protection for parents and carers. I'm going to give a little introduction to start with, just to talk about how safeguarding is set up within the school and also the role that ISP, International Schools Partnership, our ownership company, play. And then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Moyes and Mrs. Hilton, who are going to then, for the rest of the evening, talk about safeguarding, particularly to do with types of safeguarding, what we do, how we train our staff, and how safeguarding is set up. So on the first slide, it talks about and shows how safeguarding is set up in the school and how each different area, including ISP, relate to each other. So you can see there at the top of that organisational chart is what we call the Isp Central Team, who are based in the UK. And we have two people there who work specifically about looking at safeguarding. We have our Director of Health and Safety. We also have somebody who is in charge of safeguarding for the whole ISP group. And you bear in mind that the ISP group worldwide is over 50 schools now. It does require quite a lot of coordination. So the central policies for safeguarding are set by the ISP Central Team. We also have our own individual policies here, which are adapted from those and other policies that we feel are appropriate, and also our reporting line in terms of our compliance to safeguarding is to ISP. So for instance, on a monthly basis, we will send safeguarding returns to ISP in terms of how many safeguarding incidents we've had to record and report on. We will also talk about how many of our staff are safeguarding trained. We talk about how many of our staff have 10 years worth of police clearances, and also that every single member of staff who joins the school also has to have 3 references before they're allowed to engage with children. So it's critically important in the first instance that our staff are fully trained and fully compliant, and that is then fed back to the ISP Central Team, who report that at board level on a monthly basis. Then it comes into the school, and of course I have overall responsibility for safeguarding compliance for Park House, but we also have 2 other members of staff who are Mrs. Hilton as head of primary and Mr. Moyes as head of secondary, who are what we call the designated safeguarding leads, DSLs. And they are the 2 people who have overall responsibility from a school at a school level for making sure that safeguarding is dealt with in the right way, the right reporting is done, the right recording is done, and that actually the coordination of the training is put first as well. In terms of that statement there underneath the organisational chart, it talks about the safety and happiness of children at Park House as our first priority. And actually that is absolutely what we do first in the school. Yes, learning is our job, but we need to make sure that before we get involved in any learning conversations with our children, that number one, they are safe being on our school site. And that's what you would expect as parents, that we have high standards in terms of looking after your children while you entrust them into our care, and also they're happy as well, so they have a safe environment where they feel that they can challenge themselves, be open and honest, and not feel as if by opening their mouths in lessons and things that anything's going to happen to their detriment, and they're happy to learn, and children learn only really when they're happy, and we need to make sure they're safe as well. Safeguarding is always central in our agendas in the school. So for instance, I will meet with Mr. Moyes and his team and Mrs. Hilton and her team in 2 senior leadership team meetings per week to talk about issues within the secondary school and primary school, both everyday issues but also the strategic issues that we're looking at and the strategic direction we're going in the school. But the first item on every single agenda when we have those meetings is to talk about safeguarding. So we'll have a discussion about the safeguarding issues that exist in the primary school, the safeguarding issues that exist in the secondary school, and also in addition to that, Mr. Moyes and Mrs. Hilton will talk very closely to each other to make sure that actually if there's something happening in the primary school and there are siblings perhaps in the secondary school or vice versa, that we know about it across the whole school so that we have the whole picture rather than just a compartmentalised view about what's going on in the primary school or what's going on in the secondary school. So that's a reassurance for you, hopefully, how seriously we take safeguarding as our number 1 priority in the school. And what Mr. Moyes and Mrs. Hilton will do now for the rest of this evening is talk to you about how it works in the school. So I'm going to hand over to them now.
So thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And obviously, first of all, I want to talk through about what safeguarding is and outline how we go about that, and just talk to you about a few of the terms we'll be using and for you to get an understanding of what we're doing in a bit more detail. So safeguarding is everything we do to protect and make sure the children and the people in school are safe. So it's promoting their welfare. And we make a big thing in school that it's everybody's responsibility. So everyone who comes into contact with the children's families and carers has a role to play in this safeguarding of the children. And one of the key things we look at when we're looking at making sure the children are safe is putting the child at the centre of our decision making. So that means what we have to do is look at what's in the best interest of the child. So if something comes up and we have to look at a situation, we think, what is in the best interest of the child in this situation? Okay, so safeguarding is everything we're doing to try and keep the children safe. Now, sometimes you'll hear in schools, in our policies, you'll see there's safeguarding and there's child protection. And although they are linked, they are different things. Okay, so the safeguarding is the proactive things we do to make sure the children are safe when they're on the school site and at home as best we can. So all of our policies and procedures, whether they're on bullying or attendance, all of those are to ensure the safety of the children. Darren and the facilities team, all the work that's done on the health and safety of the site is to make sure that the site is safe for the children to be here. Okay. We also have to look at how we treat children with disabilities and special educational needs to make sure they are cared for appropriately. We also have to have policies that cover whistleblowing and allegations against staff. Should there be a concern with the way a member of staff is treating the children in the school, we have policies to deal with that, and policies for our staff as to how to go about raising a concern, so that if there is anything that is potentially a problem, it's raised early and dealt with. And one of the first parts of that is safer recruitment, and part of that process is we check very carefully on all the staff that we employ, including making sure, as Mr. Smith mentioned, 10 years of background checks, references from all their previous schools, to make sure that the people we're employing are the right people to work in school and have a safe environment. We also, in safeguarding, we talk to the students about online safety. A big part of safeguarding over the past 4 or 5 years, and certainly over the past 18 months, has been talking about how they behave online and how they interact with each other and other people online. And that's something, as well as parents, you need to be very aware of. Who is your child playing with when they're playing on their games console? You see them there, and you see all on the games consoles. They never put, they never put their own name. It's always like a code name, right? When you see them talking to people online, who is that you're talking to? And you really want to make sure that they're only talking to people that they know, and that when by know, I mean have actually met in person. Okay? So all things like that we talk to students about form part of safeguarding. Another big part of safeguarding is attendance. So making sure that students are attending regularly, and if we have concerns about attendance, raising them with the parents to say, look, their attendance is at this rate, this is now becoming a concern for us. So all of these things are proactive steps that we try and take to make sure the children are safe and have the opportunity to thrive. Okay. Now, child protection is a more reactive process. So this is, as it says here, an activity that we undertake where the child is suffering or likely to suffer harm. So these are protective measures and steps we might take once we think actually that child is at risk. We need to now put some actions in place to try and make sure that child is safe. Okay, so, and in these, the child protection, the safeguarding things, there are various things that we look at. And what we're going to do now is just go through some of the things that we'd be looking at that might be potentially causing the child to be suffering or at risk of suffering. Now, the first one I want to raise is bullying. Now, in schools, we have lots of children, and children are sometimes mean and unkind to each other. Now, if this is persistent, then that is called, that is bullying. So Yes, children call each other names sometimes, and we speak to them about that behaviour. If it is persistent and ongoing, that is what we class as bullying. So it might be pushing a child around, it might be leaving them out or excluding them, it might be sending WhatsApp messages or text messages or emails, and this can either hurt them emotionally or physically. Right? Often it hurts them in both those ways. And this is something as a school we are dealing with, and we have our policies for dealing with it. Okay? And these are things that have gone on in schools, and schools have been dealing with for a long, long time. Now, another issue that can come up and is an issue that can cause potentially children significant sort of harm is neglect. And this is where when parents or carers are not looking after the child properly. Okay, so we might notice in school that the student is always hungry or thirsty, they don't have the right kind of clothing, they're not looking well cared for necessarily. Okay? And this can sometimes happen when either the parent is just neglecting the child and not meeting their needs, or the child just being left on their own too long and having to fend for themselves and struggling to cope with that. And again, as a school, the things we're looking out for here is it's not a case of so-and-so didn't have their water bottle today. That's 3 times this week, or 4 times in the past 2 weeks that person hasn't had what they need for the day. There's clearly there's not someone helping them, making sure they're okay and preparing them for the day. So that is something as a school that we're looking out for. And if we notice that and we feel that we might end up having conversations with parents about that, to make sure that that child is being properly cared for and has the opportunity to thrive. We also sometimes have to deal with physical abuse. So, which is when an adult deliberately physically hurts a child, whether they hit them or kick them, punch, bite, shake them, sometimes potentially burn them. This leaves marks on the body such as cuts and bruises, and can have a very detrimental effect on the child's development. And again, this is something as a school that if we hear about, we will be, we do address, we will talk to the child about it, we will then talk to the parents and look into this further to try and make sure that child is safe. Okay, so that's something that we might be dealing with, and would be a safeguarding here, a child protection issue, to try and make sure that child has the opportunity to thrive. We also might look at emotional abuse. And this occurs when an adult is deliberately hurting a child's feelings, putting the child down, calling them names, making them feel bad about themselves. And again, this has a really big impact on the child's self-esteem, and that can have a huge detriment on their education, and therefore have huge long-term effects on their life moving forward, because they don't have that sense of self-worth that they need in order to develop fully and thrive in the school environment, and therefore later on in life. So sometimes the students pick up on this in the house. If they hear parents or see parents being mean and unpleasant to each other, that can have a big impact on the children as well. So even though that it is not directed at them, it makes them feel very unsettled and can have a really negative impact on the children and how they're feeling. Now, these are 3 or 4 of the sorts of things that might come our way that we'd be dealing with and looking at addressing in order to ensure that the child sort of can thrive and do as well as they possibly can. There might be other things that come up, that again are more sensitive, that we would also have to address if they came across our desk. Now, all of these things, it is the long-term impact it has on the child is very damaging, and we need as a school to be working to try and make sure that we protect the children from that, so they can do as well as they can and be confident as moving into their adult life. And we sometimes therefore have to have very difficult conversations about these things, but always when we're having those conversations, it's because we're putting the child first and putting their development first to make sure they can do as well as they can, because it is their interest that we have to protect. Okay? So there, some of the differences between safeguarding and child protection, and a little overview of some of the things that we have to deal with and might have to talk to parents about at various points, and the reasons we're having to have those conversations. I know that when we have to have a conversation about one of these issues with the parent, that the reason we're doing that is for the child to make sure they have the best opportunity to thrive and succeed. So we wanted you to know some of the processes we go through and why we go through them. Now, Mrs. Hilton's now going to explain some of the sort of the working practices we go through to ensure that we meet these demands and keep the children safe while we're here.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Moyes. So what I'm going to do is just run through a couple of the things that we expect from our staff. And the reason I'm doing this with all of you is to, number one, make you aware, so you're aware of what the expectations are that we have of staff, but also because we're in an international school, sometimes the lines can get quite blurred, so it's really important that we make you aware so that we don't get in any awkward situations. And I'll explain it more as I go through this. So expectations from staff, we're really clear with staff about what they should and shouldn't be doing. So with things like photography and videos, when it comes to your children, we avoid taking images of one-to-one situations or showing single children without any surrounding context or background. And the reason for that is, obviously, if you take an image without any backgrounds, those images can be used and put in other places. So as a school, we try to avoid those circumstances. Staff are not allowed to use any personal mobile devices to photograph any children or young people. It's obviously not a good idea for them to do that, especially on their own personal devices, because it can be seen as being used for an inappropriate use. So everybody has to use in-school technology and equipment provided by our school. And in the beginning of your admission, we also ask your permission to ensure that we have your permission to use your children's images. Some parents say, yep, it's okay for internal use, but not external use. Some parents say, yep, it's okay for you to use it on your social media platforms, etc., etc. But even with that, and even after seeking permission from parents and parents agreeing, we also have really strict rules and guidelines that we follow as a school, but also the ISP ensure that we follow to ensure that we are keeping children safe. So, for example, when we are putting children's images up, we would never use their second names, we would only use first names, just so that they couldn't be found, you know, if you typed in someone's full name, for example. So yeah, things like that. And then use of technology, and this is where it can get a bit sketchy when it comes to international schools, because we're in an expat environment and you generally have lots of staff that are friends with parents, and then children are there, or parents of children are friends and then parents get involved, etc. And this can be quite challenging at times. So we have an expectation from our staff, and I suppose by telling you this, it would be really helpful if a member of staff said no, don't take offence. The reasons are based on this. We do not expect our staff to share any social media platforms with children or parents, and we expect them to have full privacy settings on any of their social media platforms. They shouldn't keep them open for anyone to be able to access them. They are only allowed to use school-based platforms to communicate with child and young people and share any images or videos. So that would be for us, our Teams platform. They shouldn't be using any mobile phone contacts, etc. And that's why you'll see in the for primary school, at least for class reps, I've said, look, staff are no longer sharing WhatsApp because that's their private personal phones. You contact them via email. And they're not using their own personal mobile phones or apps to engage in any dialogue with children or young people, but also with parents as well. and sending out any of their own personal details isn't recommended, including things like blogs and personal websites. We really don't recommend that. We have also said that we need in place recording meetings and lessons because number one, ISP are requiring this from us to ensure that we are safeguarding both the children and the staff as well. So that is all up to date and on our policies on our website as well. And then from that, I just wanted to go a bit more into teams. I know we are back 100%, but you will have some children that have had recent, most up-to-date medical exemptions, and so they may still have some online contact. But also in the future, we will obviously still be using Teams for our some of our parent meetings. We'll make sure that we're still using it for the children when it comes to homework when we get to that stage. So there are a couple of things that we are going to be, number one, updating, and I'll explain the reasons why, but number two, just clarity around expectations for you as well as parents and carers. So originally, when we set up all of the children's email addresses, it had first name dot surname, and then it was at ParkHouseSchool.com. Basically, we have found that actually they're actually really not that private by having the child's first name and surname, especially when they then log in to any live lessons, because it automatically comes up with their first name and their surname. So if at the moment we've started with children in early years in year one and they no longer have their email like that, what they have now is a number and their initials at parkhouse.com, and that will change for all children over this academic year, and we've got IT moving on that process. So once they have set it up for 1 year group, it will start filtering through, so just be aware that that will happen eventually. When children do appear online for any reason, it will not now be first name and surname, it will only be their first name. And if there are two children with the same name in the class, it will be that the child is referred to by first name and a number, or first name and an initial. If we've got obviously, I don't know, an first name and then the initial of their surname is the same, we will use a number. And that would just be based on the alphabetical order of the register, just because we do not want to reveal children's surnames. So just so you're aware of that, there'll be no link to the number other than where they come in the register. All of you should be aware as well that when teachers have set up any meetings, there is a waiting lobby for the children to come in. We know that sometimes this hadn't been done, and we've addressed all of that and ensured that there is always a lobby so that we do not have random people coming into the lessons, and the teachers check every person that's being admitted into the meetings. They are obviously required to record all of those meetings from a safeguarding perspective, as well as the fact that children can go back and watch them, and only teachers are presenters unless they needed children to be able to log in and do any presenting, and then they gave it to them within the meeting. And the same for any of our parents' meetings. These are all recorded and safely stored as well, and that goes for any meetings, not just our parent evening meetings. It will be any ad hoc meetings we also have with parents too. And then moving on to our staff and our staff being trained. So Mr. Smith in the beginning of the meeting explained the rigour that we go through before we actually employ any staff, and the fact that they have 10 years worth of police checks, etc, etc. But also when they come on site, they well, actually before they come on site, they also have to complete a safeguarding training course, which basically goes into more detail the information that Mr. Moyes has just shared with you in terms of the different types of abuse that our children may or may not experience, our expectations from staff, but also it goes into case studies that have been based in the UK and around the world, case studies on staff and what to look for if you were worried about a member of staff or there was a little inkling, you know, and everybody has to do that before even coming onto site. Staff also then have training from us as well. So every first day during the inset time in the beginning of the year, they have a set of training which is very similar to what we're delivering to you now by me and Mr. Moyes. So they have those 2 lots of training that they have to go through, and then also regular meetings throughout. What I will say as well is this year you can see we're doing this training for you guys, so you guys also are aware of what our expectations are as a school, but also we need your help a little bit with this, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail a bit later. And then the other element also is that we also go through this with our children, so we do assemblies with our children as well, so they're also aware. Now, our staff are aware that day to day they need to let us know if they have any concerns, and there's specific ways that they need to do this, and I'll share this with you as well. We generally go by noticing something, seeing something, but also when it comes to safeguarding, we also go by gut. There is also that feeling that you have if something is worrying you. Staff are expected to report it to us, and between myself, Mr. Moyes, and we also have deputy safeguard leads, and we'll go through them in a moment. We have meetings and we have to report this to ISP every month, but if we have a concern between me and Mr. Moyes or Mr. Robson and Mrs. Stewart, we meet and have a discussion about some of the cases that may have come up, and we make decisions as to whether or how we take those forward. Now, this isn't stuff that we've just created. This is based on UK best practice. There is a document that we all refer to called Keeping Children Safe in Education. They release it with an update every single year. It's just on the DFE website. You can Google it and find it yourself. And all of our procedures are based on that. That's not just what we use because it's based on the UK. Actually, it's best practice used worldwide. British schools, most British schools in the Middle East use the same process. Most international schools, to be fair, because me and Mr. Moyes are also part of a safeguarding team within Qatar as well, and everyone's using it, including hospitals like Sidra, who we work closely with as well, that also have safeguarding teams that we can contact if we have any concerns. Within our school, we have our policy. I would really love for you to refer to that on our school website. It's really important that you have a read through that and understand our policies and procedures and how we do keep the children and staff safe that are on our site. And then moving on, what we then have here is just a poster. Well, it's not the poster, it's actually the pictures of our safeguard leads, including me and Mr. Moyes, and then designated safeguard leads, which are Mrs. Stewart and Mr. Robson. Now, these posters are around the school, they're on the website, they are displayed around the school for staff and children to be familiar with who they can speak to and who they can inform. Within the primary school, we have also added our nurses to the bottom as well, so that they know that they can also come and speak to the nurses if they have any concerns. And the secondary school generally know that, but they're aware, they become aware of that as well. During obviously seeing displays around the school, but also during the assemblies that we've delivered. Now, for us, basically, and to let you know, not only are we expecting our staff to report any concerns, we would like for you to also report any concerns you have. And I would say that, you know, most parents are becoming familiar with this and becoming aware of this because they've seen it on our website. But we have had parents recently coming in and expressing concerns about some children in school, things that they know that other children have seen, not even reporting it about their own children, reporting it about things, reporting things about other people's children because they're concerned about them, and we've been able to follow up and then inform parents who weren't aware of some of the incidents, and parents were really grateful for that. So just so you're aware, any of us are available. This is the form that we fill in, and this is the form that we expect staff to fill in as well if they have any concerns, and then it's sent directly to me and Mr. Moyes in the first instance normally. Parents are welcome to come, let us know if they have a safeguarding concern, and we'll note it down and follow it through. And then also on the page that was just previous, and it will come up a bit later on the very last slide, you will also there have the email address that is specifically just for safeguarding. We do not want any concerns sent through to the primary office or the information email. These have to come through to our safeguarding email to make sure they get to the right person immediately. little bit pumped up there. Okay, and then moving on to, I suppose, the difference then with pastoral concerns. What we have in our school is we obviously have safeguarding and child protection concerns, but we also have pastoral concerns. And these pastoral concerns are conversations that we have constantly. So in the primary school, we have a weekly meeting where we sit down and we speak about attendance and punctuality of children. Same thing happens in the secondary school. And so sometimes you will get an email or a letter saying, usually through email, saying, you know, your child's attendance has dropped below this percentage, you need to improve this, or your child has been late every day or picked up late every day, this needs to improve. But examples of pastoral concerns would be, again, child's punctuality, child attending school, child's lunches, things that we've just explained from Mr. Moyes in terms of the neglect element there. If children were showing signs of anxiety, where this might come about. So it doesn't automatically go to a safeguarding concern where we're having conversations with parents. Sometimes it's internal and we're just processing it internally first, and then it may then be brought forward to a safeguarding concern if it was continuous. We meet regularly and then discuss these matters, and then if we feel that it's necessary to bring it towards to a parent, then we do. Sometimes it could just be something that's happened 1 week because hamsters died, for example, and we find that out and then we're like, okay, do you know what, this isn't actually a concern, they're fine now. So just so you're aware of that. We log all of these things in school. We have an in-school system where we log it, and then we obviously send out notices to parents as and where required. And then what I thought would be interesting is just to go through some of the things that we have gone through this year, but also just for you to understand the difference in how we log them. So obviously during online learning, we had all kinds of things happening during online learning, accidental things, but things like dad walking past a video in his boxer shorts in the background of an online lesson, you guys understanding how we actually log something like that. And that, if Mr. Moyes presses it, because I don't think I kind of did it as a bit of a, it was a, yeah, kind of a quiz really, was for us, it's logged down as a safeguarding concern. If it was something like that with dad walking past in his boxer shorts, or mum, or whatever it might be, that was just an example. The reason we log that down as a safeguarding concern is because it's not that we're worried about parents walking past their own children in the background and in the safety and confidentiality of their own home. It's more so that other children may have seen that, and that may raise a concern for us. So we would usually speak to the parent that this has actually happened with, and potentially inform the other parents of the children who may have potentially seen that. We have had to delete a couple of videos offline this year where this has happened, and a parent said, I'm really, really sorry, this has just happened. I didn't realise my child was online, and then we've had to remove videos, etc. so people didn't have access to them. Sorry, I should have numbered those correctly. I don't know how that's happened there. Children being picked up late for school on 4 occasions. In this circumstance, this would just be coded as something that was pastoral, but obviously if it continued to happen, it could be something with a combination of things that then ended up being referred to as a safeguarding concern. Children having bruises on arms and legs will obviously come up as a safeguarding concern. Children getting angry when asked to do things and physically lashing out. Now, for us, this would initially go into a pastoral or behaviour concern, but potentially could turn into a safeguarding concern. Hence the reason why we have regular meetings with our teams to ensure that we're putting a whole picture together. You know, we may have one safeguarding concern from somebody, something from somebody else, then we have a pastoral meeting. When we put that picture together, that's when we start to then say, actually, you know, Mr. Moyes, you've had something in the secondary, I've had something in the primary, this has come from here, this has come from a parent, actually we might need to sit down here and have a bit more of a discussion about this. And then just to finish off then, just with a picture of all of the safeguard leads and designated safeguard leads, so you're aware of who we are. The email address if you have any concerns, because they come directly to all of those leads there. And just as a real reminder here, always have safeguarding of children in the back of your minds. It is the message that we share with our staff, and it's the message that we share with you as well. This will include any visitors to our school, etc. I know if you should know, if you come to the gates, you might come to the front, and then I'm usually saying, no, you don't have a red sticker on, you need to go back to reception and register yourself. It's not just COVID procedures, it's to ensure that we know who's been on our site. Every time you come onto school site, there may be different coloured stickers, for example. So as we open up more, and if you are part of the PSA and you're supporting in school, or you're doing guided reading, etc., you wouldn't necessarily have a red sticker. You'll end up having an orange sticker. It will eventually be a lanyard when we don't have to have individual, and we can share, but it will be an orange sticker, which basically means that we will have gone through some sort of safeguard training with you. We would then get you to sign off on that, and then that would mean for that academic year you are okay to come on site, have a sticker, not be left with children on your own, but you are allowed to come on site with the children. Obviously, if you've got a red sticker, it means you'll never be left alone with children and you haven't had any training. And then there are other different coloured lanyards, and if you look at our policy, you can get all of that information on there as well. So that's kind of a summary of our safeguarding. I hope that's informed you and given you an insight into you know, what we're doing to keep children and staff safe on school site. We'd really like you to work with us to ensure that we are allowing everybody access, and all stakeholders are aware of what those procedures are. And thank you very much for listening to us. If you do have any questions, do please pop them into the Q&A, and then I think Mr. Moyes will be able to send any through, and we'll be able to answer them.
So thank you very much, Mrs. Hilton. And obviously the Q&A is there, open in the button, the question button at the top. If you don't have any questions, that's the end of our presentation for this evening. If you do have a question you want to ask, please stay online and type it in, and we will try and answer it as best we can. Thank you very much for your time. Well, we don't seem to have any questions coming through, so thank you very much for your time this evening, and enjoy the rest of your evening.